Continuing to get a sampling of opinion from our political panel now, as this evening we're joined by Liz Peek, the conservative columnist who writes from the Fiscal Times, joining us tonight from Nantucket, and also from Newsmax Washington, conservative strategist Christopher Metzler. We thank you both for your time on Newsmax Prime. Ladies first, Liz, your assessment of last night's debate, who won, who finished second. Is it a big deal, and why?
Well, I thought that Donald Trump failed to attack Hillary Clinton on any number of fronts. I wrote about this last night right after the debate, and I think that's kind of the consensus today, that he really had lots of opportunities, lots of topics he never went to, Benghazi, the foundation, etc. And I think for those of us who support Trump, I think we were disappointed that his preparation seemed inadequate. He was not ready to respond to a number of obvious questions, and hers was obviously much better. I did think that Lester Holt clearly sort of was in the tank for Hillary, offered up a lot of questions that not only played to her advantage, but played really to her campaign themes, like this whole meme about Donald Trump being in league with Vladimir Putin and so forth. But nonetheless, Trump did not handle it very well. Do I think it's important? Not necessarily, although when you have 13% of white voters undecided and 15% of non-white voters undecided, that's a lot of people you're trying to reach. We reached 80 million apparently in this debate, so it would have been great to deliver a real knockout blow to Hillary.
And that's the real thing, the KO blow. That it seems to be a regret, is the developing consensus, Chris Metzler. And I guess my question, since you've been a political strategist, what argument would you have taken to Donald Trump saying, Mr. Trump, look, you've got some natural abilities, but you need to practice? Is there anything, or did he just have to go through this experience to get the realization that, okay, my consultants were right, I got to practice a mock debate? About a minute, Chris.
No, I think I would have gone to him directly and say, you know, this is win or lose. You've got to practice. You have to dispatch her. Look, we knew what she was going to do, and she did it. She got under his skin. The first part of the debate, he was doing well, but then she got under his skin. And so as a result of that, he came off as being wholly unprepared. He should have been able to go out there and say, okay, this is what a commander-in-chief looks like. Here's how he behaves, those kinds of things. I was really, really, really upset that he did not make quick work of her. The whole thing about the birther thing, I would have just said simply, listen, I've answered this question and moved on. And that's the problem that I think that we have.
You know, you've set this up so well, Chris, because you said answer the question and move on. That's what you've both done now, and given where we are in terms of the clock, we're going to move on, but we want you to stay right there, because when we come back, we will talk to Liz and to Christopher about the notion of the first debate. Yes, it's important, but history shows it may not be all that important. Ed Berliner does his research. He'll share it with us next. Continuing now on Newsmax Prime, it is worth noting that it's not one and done when it comes to presidential debates. Two more are scheduled here in 2016. And as Ed Berliner reminds us, prevailing in the first debate does not ensure a first-place finish on Election Day.
Your state of Florida got $12.6 billion in federal money last year from Nebraskans and Virginians and New Yorkers and Alaskans with their Eskimo poetry. 12.6 out of a state budget of $50 billion. I'm supposed to be using this time for a question, so here it is. Can we have it back, please?
Whether it's the Hollywood version or the real thing, we the people have it drilled into our cranial-frontal lobes that presidential debates, especially the first one, are the meat and potatoes of changing minds and ensuring one candidate is fitted for the nuclear football. In light of Trump-Clinton won Monday night, then, a reality check, please.
Now, maybe I'm expected to ask that same question again. I'm not going to, because I think that all of you, or Not everyone. Those people that are in those pockets of poverty and haven't caught up, they couldn't answer the way I would want them to. But I think that the most of the people in this country would say, yes, they are better off than they were 4 years ago.
Ronald Reagan walked off stage from his first debate against Walter Mondale in '84 and correctly noted he flopped with a rambling performance. Of course, he came back in the second debate and buried Mondale to win the election.
You don't take America to war unless you have a plan to win the peace. You don't send troops to war without the body armor that they need.
First meeting between George Bush and John Kerry in '04, the consensus was that Kerry came off more forceful and made the president look like an amateur. Bush lost the debate, but he rolled to the win in November.
When the president took office, 32 million people on food stamps, 47 million on food stamps today. Economic growth this year slower than last year, and last year slower than the year before. Going forward with the status quo is not going to cut it for the American people who are struggling today.
And much to the chagrin of the GOP, Mitt Romney ran circles around President Obama in their 2012 opener, but come November, the president prevailed. Hillary Clinton and her team may be confident today, but wait, sports metaphor, that's why you play the games. JD, it's all yours.
Thanks, Ed. It's not all fun and games, though, because we've got the history and the reputation and the future of the United States at stake. And to discuss it more, let's welcome back our political panel. First, tonight from Nantucket, conservative columnist for the Fiscal Times, Liz Peek, and from Newsmax Washington, conservative strategist Christopher Metzler. Now, Liz, history means that the first debate is not catastrophic. It doesn't destroy a candidacy. We got the historical view there from Ed. But you have to learn from that first debate. I guess Chris touched on this earlier, but will Donald Trump heed the warning now and really get the right kind of preparation, mock debates, preparing to present his best case?
Well, I think we've seen that he can pivot. His style changed markedly over the summer, and it worked for him. The thing that really drives Donald Trump is polling. And if the polls in the next few days show that he lost some of the momentum with which he entered the debate arena, I think he will change his style and he will agree to some debate prep. Look, this is not rocket science. All you have to do, which is what Hillary did, is to have certain triggers. So somebody says something about cyber attacks, which actually happened last night, and you immediately go to Hillary's disregard for national security secrets and careless handling of emails. You know, there are prompts that should prompt a response in Donald Trump. It's not that hard, but you know what? If you haven't practiced it and you're not ready with an answer, and he clearly wasn't on a number of occasions, then you look befuddled. And, you know, she makes a big thing about how Trump is not prepared. This is not what he wants to do in a debate.
Well, let's turn to some of the substance itself, Christopher. Specifically, during the discussion on race relations in our nation, Mr. Trump renewed his call for allowing police to stop and frisk suspects. Let's watch.
We have to bring back law and order. Now, whether or not in a place like Chicago you do stop and frisk, which worked very well, Mayor Giuliani is here, it worked very well in New York, it brought the crime rate way down. We have to take the guns away from these people that have them and that are bad people that shouldn't have them.
Donald Trump trying to run as the law and order candidate. Chris, there have been those who have compared 2016 to 1968. Can Mr. Trump make the argument as the law and order candidate, or is this active fomenting of the left that we saw last week in Charlotte going to give some voters pause?
Well, I think he can make the case as the law and order candidate, but words do matter, and we understand that active and in many cases active fomenting of the left really raises this discussion to a level where it needs to be, where it does not need to be. And so for me, it would be about profiling and not racial profiling, because he's falling into this trap when you talk about stop and frisk, for example, about racial profiling. Look, stop and frisk is very easy. You're in an area where you're suspicious. The police has the right to stop you and to act accordingly. And understand that stop and frisk is for the community safety. He's got to get that message across, though, above the racial fray, because what has happened is the left has turned this into an unnecessary racial discussion.
Turning around, though, Liz, Hillary has been so eager to rhetorically embrace the Black Lives Matter movement that she appears, well, there's no way to sugarcoat it, almost anti-police. There's got to be a real downside to that for her, does there not?
Well, I think so, yes, because with videos, for example, of Charlotte's riots showing a white man savagely beaten and dragged through the streets by an angry black mob, that really alarms white voters. I mean, there's just no getting around it. So I think that the push for criminal justice reform, which is where she constantly goes to, is bipartisan. There's good reason to think that our sentencing laws need to be reformed. But the truth is the police keep us safe. And, you know, what's happened over the last 4 or 5 weeks is that Donald Trump's lead with white voters has skyrocketed. And Hillary Clinton needs to be careful here because she may win the black vote. She is winning the black vote. Her quest is to get people to turn out at the polls, but she may lose the white vote by such big numbers. You know, Dick Morris wrote in Armageddon, his book, that 10 million white voters sat out the 2012 election. And what Trump has been able to do is bring a lot of those people back into the primaries. We've seen big numbers for white voters. So his job is to attract and keep those white voters, and she could be in trouble just because of those numbers.
And there are other numbers, Chris, that we need to talk about. Specifically, we know the huge number of African Americans who turned out to vote for Barack Obama not once but twice. There are some cynics among us, maybe including me, looking at the Soros money and the professional agitators flocking to Charlotte in an effort to raise the intensity for black voters to show up and support Hillary. But the fact is, if Donald Trump is able to have a modest increase in African American support, that likewise can help him. In terms of the numbers, what kind of increase does Trump need to really make a dent and affect the outcome of the election, at least in terms of the popular vote, Chris?
Well, I think if he gets somewhere about, if he gets to about 7%, I think, you know, he'll be fine. And my understanding from talking to a number of folks is that he probably will get more than that. Because here's what he's done. What he has done is he has gone out and said, okay, I am asking for your vote, as opposed to the Democratic Party, who believes that they are entitled to that vote. There is, and if we look at African Americans, what we understand is that we are, by nature, very conservative people. And so I think people are downplaying that. It is a lot of the race baiters are saying, never gonna happen, not so much.
And the interesting thing is, we hear so much about, quote, white backlash. Quite frankly, there can be backlash from the African American community, law-abiding people working, wanting better futures that can actually come to the aid of Donald Trump. Very interesting discussion tonight. Christopher Metzler from Newsmax, Washington, and Liz Peek summering, although it's fall, in Nantucket. Our thanks to you both. We'll continue the conversation again real soon. Still to come, our American moment. But we also get a little bit of entertainment. Actor Jackson Hurst about his new movie for one night only tomorrow night, Vanished, Left Behind, Next Generation. Don't leave us behind. There's more next on Newsmax Prime.